Now live on HHTV, you may begin.
Good evening, and welcome to the first of our election forums for this fall's general election. My name is Neil McReynolds, who, along with Laura Weiss, co-chair of the Election Forums Committee here at Horizon House. This is our second series of election forums this year. In July, before the August primary election, we held 3 forums to help voters reduce the long list of candidates to 2 people for November general election. Beginning this evening, we will be conducting forums for the finalists who will be vying for offices in the key races in November. Whereas for this fall's general election, our focus this evening will be on the candidates for the Seattle Port Commission. Next week, we'll be hearing from the candidates for mayor of Seattle and for the Seattle School Board. And in 2 weeks, the candidates for City Council position number 9 and the City Attorney. These forums are designed to help you prepare to vote for candidates for the important City Council, City, County, Port, and School Board offices. Co-sponsor this series of election forums are our Residents Council here at Horizon House and the First Hill Unit of the Seattle King County League of Women Voters. I want to thank the League for joining us again this year and acknowledge Bernice Kastner, the leader of the Seattle's First Hill Unit and also a Horizon House resident. In addition to the candidates in the November general election, you'll be asked to vote on 5 ballot measures. 3 of them will be the state advisory votes and 2 will be the King County Charter amendments. None of them can be considered high-profile ballot issues like the one we have faced in recent elections. What are state advisory votes? Well, let me explain briefly. Whenever the state legislature passes a tax increase, an advisory vote is placed on the next general election ballot and triggers a separate advisory vote. The results will not change the law. Supporters of advisory votes say the results will provide feedback for lawmakers. Tim Hyman helped create this advisory votes through initiative. Seattle Times, in an editorial this morning, took a position on the advisory votes. They wrote, and I quote, "Advisory votes don't repeal the law, but they do reveal public opinion about revenue increasing legislation." The Times editorial is worth reading because it also describes in more detail what each of the 3 advisory votes would do. In addition to the state ballot measures, King County has proposed 2 charter amendments that are considered housekeeping measures. These county charter amendments and the 3 state advisory votes are described in the handout written by Gene Worthen of our committee. The handout, which also includes pictures of the port candidates, was placed in your mailbox over the weekend. Before turning over the program to our moderator for the evening, I think we need to briefly address the question that keeps getting raised. Why spend so much time on the Port Commission when the Seattle City races is a big interest this year? Well, good question. There's an answer. Port races are often overlooked. Here's why they should get more attention. The port plays a major role in the economy of the region. Sea-Tac Airport, one of the port's primary responsibilities, is providing a valuable service for all of us and is increasing in importance. It's been one of the nation's busiest passenger airports. Port also operates one of the North America's largest maritime cargo shipping gateways through the Pacific Northwest Seaport Alliance, which is a joint effort with the Port of Tacoma. It also manages commercial fishing operations, a grain terminal, 4 public recreational marinas, and 2 cruise ship terminals. All this adds up to the fact that the port is one of Pacific Northwest's leading economic engines, generating over 300,000 port-related jobs each year. Well, if the port is run well and deals effectively with the growing demands of the area, then we will benefit. That then is the job of the Port Commission, to see to it that the port is running well and is meeting the growing needs of this area. Good question. I get asked, how is the port funded? Well, the port receives property tax money for the residents of King County, but its primary revenue source is from the revenue it generates from Sea-Tac Airport, cruise facilities, and other port operations and services. Another question, what then is the role of the Port Commissioner? Well, the Port Commission responsibility is to hire and oversee an executive director who manages the day-to-day operations of the port. Commission works with the management in developing strategy and policy that will allow the port to meet its long-term goals and ensure that the port is making progress toward those goals. Well, sounds like the role of a corporate board of directors. Well, it does. And it should, because the port is running a very big business with a budget of nearly $1 billion a year. However, the port is a public entity and needs to be sensitive to the needs and the wants of a countywide constituency. It's an interesting balancing act. With that as background for the port, let me introduce our moderator for the forum, Sam Sperry. Sam?
Thank you, Neil, and welcome everyone. This evening we have 6 candidates for the Port of Seattle Commission. Running in position 1 are Ryan Calkins, the incumbent. He is challenged by Norman Zigler. In position number 3, we have Stephanie Bowman, the incumbent, who is challenged by Hamdi Mohammed. And in position 4, we have incumbent Peter Steinbruck, who is challenged by Toshiko Grace Hasagawa. Now, each of you will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. After all your opening statements are made, you will have 1 minute to answer questions submitted by Horizon House residents. Please honor the time limit. Our timekeeper is very strict. In fact, she's the terror of Horizon House with awesome power to mute your microphone. I thank you in advance for adhering to the timer signals. This will ensure you each have time to answer as many questions as possible. An on-screen warning sign will alert you when you have 15 seconds remaining, and if necessary, you'll get a final sign saying, please finish. As this is a forum, not a debate, there will be no rebuttal, but you may include such remarks in your 2-minute closing statement. I will pose questions to each candidate by position, and I will rotate the order of questioning so that no one position goes first or last. And I will alternate asking the questions between the challengers and the incumbent as we go through the questions. Now be sure to let me know if I need to repeat the question. So now for your opening statements, and please include your response to the question we sent you in advance. That question is, please tell us why you are a candidate for the Port of Seattle Commission, what your goals and emphasis as a commission member will be, and how you plan to accomplish these goals. So first to go on this are the candidates for position 4, and Ms. Hasagawa, we would like you to start, please.
I've never gotten to go first in a forum before, and I am so honored. So go ahead and start the clock, and I'll take it off. Good evening, everybody. My name is Toshiko Hasagawa. It's like the I is silent. I'm a 4th generation Japanese American. My great grandparents actually immigrated through the port in search of economic opportunity. And we've always lived on Beacon Hill. Being raised near the sea and the airport, I appreciate that maritime and aviation are more than just the economic drivers that they are. They are integral to our regional history, our cultural identity, and they've helped families like mine across generations be able to break into the middle class. Today, I am the state's top official on Asian Pacific American Affairs. I was appointed by Governor Inslee in 2018 as the director of a state agency. I serve upon the Disaster Resiliency Work Group as well as the subcabinet on business diversity. And when COVID hit, I saw firsthand how it hit businesses and it hit families hard. I saw missed opportunities at the Port of Seattle. And I also saw how really it was both shipping and fishing that really served as the economic backbone and the driver of our region's economy during its hour of greatest need. So I'm running for the Port of Seattle because I've observed the current leadership be reactive instead of proactive. And the port has a tremendous role to play in answering to the economic and public health and environmental issues of our time. And so my campaign priorities are to physically rebuild our economy through green infrastructure. And so I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk about what a sustainable port can look like so that the rising tide of our recovery can lift all of our ships. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And now it is time for Mr. Steinbrook.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
Commissioner Steinbrook.
Peter, you need to unmute.
Sorry, we'll start over again. It was my pleasure to be here about 4 years ago. I promised to lead the port with a steady hand, with integrity and principle, and advance open, transparent, and ethical government. I have lived up to all of those principles and objectives and more in my 3.5 years in service to the port and to the people of King County. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm not good at canned speeches or rattling off extensive lists of endorsements. I've been a proactive leader on the Port Commission, working alongside my co-commissioners and the great port staff, but I don't wait for them to tell us what to do. I led with the $10 million South King County Community Fund that is expanding economic opportunity and jobs to underserved communities in King County. I initiated a port policing task force on civil rights and advancing police reforms. But my core responsibility, as you can see in my background picture here, is a steady hand at leading the port's core mission, which is jobs, economic development, and ensuring that our transportation infrastructure is modernized and up to the task while ensuring environmental sustainability and social equity in everything we do, centering equity. And that's what we've done. That's what I will continue to do with a lot of irons in the fire to keep up the great work of the port. We are building the nation's most progressive port of the future through equitable middle income jobs, leading on climate protection, environmental sustainability, and ending systemic racism. We are responsible as the driver of economic development for our region and the state, operating on less than 5% tax dollars. No other government can even come close to touching that. What we are not is a social service agency for the city of Seattle. I'm done. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Steinbrook. And now from position one, Mr. Zigler, please.
Hello, Horizon House. My name is Norman Zigler. This is my third time in front of you all. I was here in 2015 when I ran for port, position number 5, and I was here in 2009 when I ran for mayor of Seattle. And I am very grateful to be in front of you again today. Thank you for taking time to learn about me and my reasons for wanting to be your next Port of Seattle commissioner in position number 1. I plan to lead with bold actions such as moving to carbon neutrality by 2030 instead of the current timeline of 2050. Climate change is here. We need to act now. We have less than 10 years to change the trajectory of humanity. I also plan to designate a portion of the operating expenses of the port. So the port right now has an operating budget of about $680 million. And a portion of that needs to be set aside to mitigate port pollution and impact of port operations in neighboring communities, such as Burien, here in Normandy Park, noise and environmental pollution. And I also think that we need to set aside a % of port profits to invest in those communities for future port-related jobs. The Port of Seattle was founded 110 years ago by citizens of King County. That investment 110 years ago laid the foundation of the economy that we see and enjoy today. 110 years ago, the residents created the port. We're looking for commissioners that will be able to lead the port for the next 150 years, 110 years. I moved here in 2003 to be the manager of finance and contracts for Alaska Airlines, managing the engine budget. It was $55 million engine budget at the time. This is my third time working for an airline. I've worked for Northwest Airlines, which is now Delta, and I also worked for Continental Airlines, which is now United. I will be the only port commissioner, probably in the last 20, 30 years, with direct aviation experience as a port commissioner. My first job out of undergrad, Washington and Lee University in Virginia, was as an environmental scientist. Again, my first jobs out of business school at the University of Michigan was in the aviation sectors. My professional life, I am an executive search recruiter, so I help organizations diversify their leadership teams. I am a retained executive search recruiter. I've worked for Mary's Place, Seattle Art Museum, finding their CFO. I've worked for Seattle Aquarium, Community Passageways. I'm working on their COO, and I'd be honored to have your vote from Horizon House for my candidacy for port position number 1. And I'd like to say hello to Henry Kuharik. Dr. Kuharik, I hope your mouth is better from your tooth pain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zigler. Mr. Calkins?
Thank you, Sam. 4 years ago, I ran for the Port of Seattle Commission as a relative newcomer to politics. And voters took a chance on me based on my commitment to environmental justice and shared prosperity. In this, my bid for re-election, the Sierra Club, Washington Conservation Voters, unions, firefighters, Teamsters, laborers, carpenters, Attorney General Bob Ferguson, Congress members Jayapal Smith and Larson, as well as dozens of elected leaders from around King County, including all of our legislative districts in the county. All 17 of them have endorsed my campaign. The Port of Seattle is a key economic driver for our region, supporting tens of thousands of family wage jobs and hundreds of local small businesses. As a commissioner, I've worked to preserve jobs and to create new ones. And just as important, I've opened new opportunities for everyone to share in the prosperity of a growing economy, including the establishment of Maritime High School, which was featured this weekend in the Seattle Times. I've worked hard to make the Port of Seattle an environmental leader, demonstrating that economic growth and sustainability are not at odds. In fact, done right, responding to climate change can mean new jobs and industries for our region. We need to overhaul the way we fuel our ships and planes and trucks before it's too late. That's why we cut our carbon emissions in half, 10 years ahead of schedule, and are pursuing the most ambitious environmental agenda of any port in the nation. At the same time, I know that there is much more to be done. We need to accelerate our transition to clean fuels, support the development of electric aviation, explore high-speed ground transportation, and focus on industries that reverse climate change, like renewable energy. I love this job, and I am so grateful for the privilege to serve in this role. And I look forward to a vigorous debate tonight on port issues. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. And now from position 3, Hamdi Mohami.
Good evening, Horizon House. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today and to seek your support. I will start off by sharing just a little bit about myself. I was raised in a family of entrepreneurs. My father had a small trucking company, and my mother was a Sea-Tac Airport worker who later started a childcare business. And my husband was an airline employee. I have always identified the port as my community. I remember my father would take us to the seaport and he would point to the TEUs, the 20-foot equivalent unit containers, and he would describe how international trade and the exchange of goods between countries contribute to a robust global community. I decided to run for the Port of Seattle Commission because I believe that the Port of Seattle can lead our state in recovering from the pandemic. I have the skills, relationships, and expertise to achieve real results for businesses and communities in and around the port. I have dedicated my life to public service. I've worked for our government at the federal level and at the local level. Currently, I work for King County Executive Dow Constantine as a policy advisor. I advise on the county's $12 billion budget and manage initiatives that invest millions into our small businesses, community organizations, and local community. My priorities will include economic development, workforce development, and environmental protection. And my plans will help us maintain and strengthen a thriving and competitive global economy. And I intend to do that in partnership with our local governments and jurisdiction. I'm proud to say that our campaign has been endorsed by Congressman Smith, King County Executive Dow Constantine, Attorney General Bob Ferguson, Commissioner of Public Lands, over 50 legislators. And I will pause there, and I hope to answer any questions you may have tonight.
Thank you very much. And now Stephanie Bowman.
Well, good evening, Horizon House. Thank you for letting me join you tonight. I'm Stephanie Bowman, your current Port of Seattle Commissioner. I'm excited to be running again for election to the Port because for me, the mission of the Port is to provide economic opportunity for all throughout King County. Our responsibility is to manage the Port's assets, which I say many times are assets of statewide significance that are critical to Washington's economy. I'd like to tell you a few things that I've done and how I'm building on those accomplishments over the next 4 years. I have the sole endorsement of the King County Building Trades Union because in 2020, we saved thousands of workers from losing their jobs by continuing with port construction projects when other agencies shut down those jobs in the middle of the pandemic. But building on this, I've set a goal to create 5,000 new equitable green jobs through port investments in carbon reduction, energy efficiency, and habitat restoration. We can restore the Duwamish, Seattle's only river, by cleaning up our stormwater and clean up our air by moving towards zero emission trucks on port terminals and getting sustainable aviation fuels in our airplanes. I have the endorsement of the Northwest Women's Political Caucus and leaders Governor Gary Locke and Governor Gregoire for my commitment to helping women and people of color as I led the effort to create a COVID vaccination clinic at the airport for our workers, which has already helped vaccinate more than 5,000 workers of color. I also led the effort to triple the number of women and minority businesses that contract with the Port. Moving forward, I'll continue my focus on helping those furthest from opportunity by making investments in South King County and building on my work, creating more than 600 jobs for youth from underserved communities. You probably don't think about the Port when you think about homelessness. However, 2 years ago, I worked with community leaders and led the effort to create the first tiny house village ever on Port property, helping those living unsheltered on our streets have a stable, safe place to go. Moving forward, I'm already excited to be expanding this site for more residents. We have a lot of work to do, and I'm thrilled to be endorsed by dozens of community elected leaders. Most importantly, though, I'm glad to be here tonight to answer all your questions. Thank you so much.
Before we proceed, Ms. Bowman, I was able to hear you all right, but did anybody else find that her voice was a little lower than the others? You might want to check your computer, please, to see if you could increase the volume a little bit.
Will do.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, we will now proceed to the Q&A. And as indicated above, everybody will have 1 minute. And I will start with challengers in this round and position number 1. The question is, how do you define your authority, responsibilities, and limitations as a commissioner in relationship to the executive director? Mr. Zigler, please, in position 1.
Thank you for this question. And again, you mentioned this in your opening, the responsibilities of a commissioner are really 2 things, is to hire the executive director of the Port and replace them as needed. And so I hope to bring my skill set as an executive recruiter, helping numerous organizations when they have changes in leadership to find the best candidate to fill that position. So I do that by talking to stakeholders, understanding what they're looking for in a new leader for this public agency. So the stakeholders would be the vendors, the companies that use the ports, the airlines, the cruise ships, the maritime operations, understanding what their visions are for the future of the port in our region. The community groups. I heard this weekend from Kirkland, people asking me, well, what can the port do for us? And the port can do a lot of things for the people in King County. And I want to make sure that we educate folks in King County about the roles of the port and its executives. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Calkins.
Thanks for the question. I think it's really important to understand what our official organizational chart is structured like. It starts with the people of King County at the very top. Then you have the 5-member commission, and then the executive director and a couple of other direct reports. But that visual is very important because, as Neil had mentioned in the preamble, We aren't strictly a private business, and yet we operate so many business lines that are profit and loss driven. And so we need to be supple in that way and have characteristics of a board of directors and also characteristics of a public agency that is held to a much higher standard of transparency and stability. No matter what we do, we need to make sure that our operations are functioning, rain or shine, any sort of natural disaster, we're a critical lifeline. So I do believe that our essential function is to ensure that we've picked the right person for executive director and that we continue to provide regular oversight for the key functions, including the establishment of the budget each year. And then the other important thing I would say is that we're the group at the port that's most responsible for thinking 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years out, to think about the port that we want in a generation.
All right, thank you. For position 3, Ms. Mohammed.
Great, thank you for this question. The role that I see the port commissioners playing in collaboration with the executive, obviously they have the responsibility to recruit and hire the executive and even appoint the directors. And so ensuring that that position is being held by someone who's also responsible and is prioritizing the needs of our county. The big role that also the Port Commission has to play is an oversight role for the budget. The Port Commissioners approve and adopt the annual budget. They help make decisions on big investments that are happening, the capital investments that our port is making, ensuring that they're adopting the tax levy dollars, right? That is one that a lot of King County voters don't realize, that we actually pay into the port's operation. And when I'm out in the community on the east side and I'm talking to folks in Kent on the phone or in person, and I tell them I'm running for the Port of Seattle Commission, often they will say, I live in Bellevue or I live in Kent. I can't vote in a port race, or the port doesn't represent me. And I think the commissioners have to play a role in ensuring that they change that, as well as evaluating.
I have to call time, Ms. Mohammed, that time is up, please. All right. Now it is to Ms. Bowman.
Great, thank you. I'll speak a little louder. So I think a few of my colleagues have already said it. Our primary responsibility is to hire the executive director. I do want to call out that I was part of the commission that made the decision to change the title from CEO to executive director a few years ago. And that wasn't just semantics. It was very much that we wanted to move away from the idea that the leader of the day-to-day operations of the port was not looking at the port from a CEO model, but was really thinking about it more from the community level as well, which is why we chose the term executive director. The commission is also responsible for co-leading the head legal counsel and the director of government relations. We don't appoint any other directors at the port. Our job is policy guidance to the executive director, and we pass the annual operating and capital budgets. I will say, I think it's an important role for us to be able to be the ears and the eyes for the community and report back to our professional staff about what we're hearing. But we work in collaboration with the executive director, but he is the person who is in charge of our day-to-day operations.
Thank you very much. And from position 4, Ms. Hasagawa.
Thank you, Sam. And I think the way that I'll frame this is I really see the Port Commission as the closest thing to public oversight of Port of Seattle operations that the port really has. There's 5 positions. They're supposed to represent the will of King County voters, and that means bringing that eye, bringing that voice and that experience to the table, particularly as it comes to writing policies, establishing our value statements, including in the construction and approval of a budget. And so, yes, we do have a collaborative relationship with the executive director and staff. And that also means raising questions and making suggestions, and taking motions to guide that work in order to make it better. I am so proud of the work that I have and the experience in building systems of accountability, conducting systemic reviews, advising on policies to improve and achieve best run governments at the state and county level. And I am the candidate with specific experience in oversight of operations to improve transparency and ultimately promote public trust in government operations.
Thank you. And finally, for position 4, Mr. Steinbrook.
Sure, thanks. Well, we are one of only 3 elected offices countywide. We have a large constituency to serve. I'm not there to be a follower. I am not there for ambition. I am there to be a mission-driven leader with practical years of experience, integrity, and principle, and I deliver. So what we do, you've heard from several other commissioners who know well what the role of commissioners are. It is certainly not to follow staff, as some have accused. That's absurd. We're there to lead the port with inspired leadership, with a vision to the future. We are not your granddaddy's port of the past. We are leading on economic development, equitable jobs, environmental sustainability, and social equity. And we are advancing new initiatives, setting new policies, and prioritizing our budget around the commission's policies as a group of committed, dedicated public servants accountable to the citizens at large in our county with transparency, open government, and integrity.
Okay, thank you all very much. Now for question 2. How do you plan to address the problem of access to and egress from Sea-Tac Airport, which is resulting in increased traffic congestion and pollution? To start us off from position 3, Ms. Bowman.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. This is something I've spent quite a bit of time with my time on the commission. First of all, we need to reduce single occupancy trips to the airport and increase the opportunity for residents to get to Sea-Tac by transit. I was proud to be appointed to the ST3 elected leaders board that made decisions on the to the board of directors about the alignment about ST3. It's something I'm very passionate about, both sound transit and metro access to Sea-Tac. We cannot continue to have people drive in individual cars. We just simply don't have enough room on our highways. But most importantly, it truly is about our carbon footprints. Using for our port employees that work at the airport, increasing their opportunities to use transit, free Orca cards is one way to do it. Making sure that our transit is accessible to those with mobility problems. Those are things that I've worked on my time on the Port Commission. We have more to do, but it is the direction that we're going.
Thank you. Also from position 3, Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you for the question. I actually live 1 mile away from Sea-Tac Airport, and accessibility is such an important issue to me, as well as transportation and ensuring that our airport is one of the most accessible airports in the nation. And while I promote sound transit and metro, I will tell you, if you are taking the light rail from Sea-Tac, that elevator is always down, and we have to change that, and we have to make investments to ensure that if we are going to tell people to take sound transit and our light rails and metro, that we have to make sure that we're making investments to ensure that they're operating well. As a resident of South King County, I can tell you that the community here is heavily impacted by pollution. In 2018, over 170,000 complaints came into the Port of Seattle. 2019, 400,000 complaints came into the Port of Seattle, and that was from residents. And those complaints are related to run-ups, takeoffs, landing, noise pollution. And the university, I'm at time, but we have to address that and make investments and really listen to what the communities are saying.
Thank you very, very much. From position number 4, Mr. Steinbrook.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. First of all, Sea-Tac Airport is the largest gathering place in the state of Washington and the most important critical infrastructure we have in the state, serving and to the point in which our economy depends regionally and statewide. Yes, there's traffic congestion. Yes, there's pollution. Yes, we are one of the fastest expanding hub airports in the country. And we're working on all of those fronts. One of the things I did in 2019 was to establish the Ground Transportation Access Plan, which is a multifaceted, comprehensive approach to doing just what the question asked, reducing private automobile trips and increasing transit, sound transit, and other forms of transit like BRT. Why isn't there an express BRT from Bellevue, which is not served by Sound Transit right now? Why is there only 6% ridership from Sound Transit? We can do much better. We're working to curtail noise and pollution through many other initiatives I don't have time to mention. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hasagawa.
Well, thank you, Sam. I think first of all, where I would start is I would actually incentivize our own workforce to be able to use mass transit as opposed to driving to work every day. I think that building additional parking lots and encouraging more folks to get on the roads is the exact opposite direction of where we should be going. I would love to see all of our employees be able to receive free Orca passes. That way they're not paying up for that out of their own pocket. I would love to zoom out and take a 10,000-foot view at our infrastructure and be able to plan for the projected growth that we know is going to continue to come to our region. Let's talk about high-speed rail that's going to meaningfully connect our region, all the different major hubs, north-south oriented, so that people have an alternative to flying. The other thing that should be said is that if we were to reduce air travel just by 5%, it'd be the equivalent of removing 220,000 cars off of the road. That's an improvement in the quality of life for workers and for residents who are suffering from issues of congestion and mobility, as well as the air pollution. And so I would love to be able to work with nearby businesses and hotels to make sure that we are incorporating hybrid models so that folks don't feel like they have to travel, because so much of the air travel, in addition to shipping, is actually also for business
Okay, I'm
travel as
sorry, I
well.
have to call time.
Thank you.
Okay, and for position number one, Mr. Calkins.
Well, this is a very timely question, as tomorrow at our public meeting, we're going to be debating the authorization of funds to expand the arrivals and departures, the road basically that leads to the airport from 2 lanes to 4. There's a choke point. It's been creating all sorts of congestion. And the important thing to note is that it's congestion that backs up our buses and our shuttles and our multi-passenger vehicles more than anything. And so by expanding it, we're able to get those mass transit vehicles into the parking garage and into the places where they do pickups and drop-offs quicker, so that we can get to that optimal mode share, meaning we can get more people into mass transit uses. And then the other big thing is with the expansion of Sound Transit 3, we want to push our total Sound Transit ridership for Sea-Tac from 7% up to about 14 or 15%, which is where an equivalent of peer airport like San Francisco is currently at about 15% on BART. And so we want to get to that level. And the only way we can do that is to make sure that it's easily accessible for passengers coming to and from.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Zigler.
Thank you for this question. I agree with a lot of things that have been said previously. I think that the first and foremost thing is to make sure that we have the best connectivity to Sound Transit. Right now, the way that terminal was built a mile away from the airport is a disgrace, and people who are traveling by train have to walk or haul their luggage a long way to get to the terminal. So we need shuttles or a moving walkway as soon as possible. I'd also like to see regional bus service with direct service to Sea-Tac. In West Seattle, we used to have a bus that went from the junction directly to Sea-Tac. We need to bring that bus back. We need to add a bus in Northgate, in Bellevue. We need a bus Tacoma. We need all of our regional transit hubs to have direct access to Sea-Tac International Airport, and that'll go a long way to removing cars from our roads. Thank you.
All right, we'll now move to question 3. Studies show that airport and marine operations, including those of contractors, adversely impact the health and environment of people living near port facilities. How can these impacts of noise, traffic, and serious health hazards be reduced? We'll start with position number 4, Ms. Hasagawa.
Thank you, Sam. So I live in North Beacon Hill in the same house where my great-grandparents bought their home. And we live here historically because of redlining. It's the only place where people of color were allowed to live. And still, we live in that legacy where people were clustered around these port neighborhoods because they were thought to be undesirable. And now they have proximity to the pollution, which is why they have disparate health outcomes. I see my daughter look up at the planes with wonder, and I also know that kids like her are going to have a higher incidence in asthma, higher infant mortality, lower life expectancy. It impacts their educational outcomes. So, this is we're talking about social justice. And so I would love to see us enter into memorandum of understanding with the tribes to be able to see a full cleanup plan into fruition. I would love to see us to be able to invest in innovative technologies that can help us to be able to convert away from the fossil fuel paradigm and into one of sustainable renewable energy sources.
All right, Mr. Steinbrook.
Yeah, thanks. Just a sec here. Yeah, okay, we're good. Okay, so we are making inroads on all of those issues regarding the expansion of Sea-Tac Airport, which is absolutely necessary in order to modernize our facilities to meet the demand that travelers place on our region. We do not drive demand. It is created and it's growing by the demand of everybody who uses air travel, and as well as our cargo operations there. At the seaport, the same is true. The shipping is driven by consumer demand, and much of it is going out to the Midwest and other places. But what we need to do is to continue our great efforts to clean up the Duwamish River. And we are partners with the city of Seattle, King County, and Boeing in that effort. And we've been working for decades, and we will spend probably hundreds of millions for that job, to do that. My King County $10 million Community Impact Fund, South King County, is directed precisely at those communities that have been underserved and historically disproportionately impacted by airport area noise and pollution. And we're working economic and environmental programs that support dozens of community projects in those communities.
All right, from position 1, next is Mr. Zigler.
Right. I think, well, one of my proposals that I outlined in my opening is to set aside a portion of the port operations, the money, to mitigate these impacts of noise, pollution, and the serious health concerns of the environment. I think we can set aside about 25% of port profits. I think the port makes about $100 million a year that is then reinvested back into port operations. I think a portion of that needs to go into those mitigation services. We also need to plant more trees around the airport and port properties, not in the flight path trees. In regard to aircraft pollution and noise, again, I'm an aviation guy. My first job at Northwest Airlines was route planning, where we fly and how many times. We need to right size our aircraft. So instead of flying 30 times Seattle to Portland, maybe we only need 15 flights, but with bigger aircraft. So we'll have less takeoff and landings, but be able to carry the same amount of passengers between the two cities.
Thank you. Mr. Calkins.
I think to answer this question, it's important to understand the scale of the problem. The Port of Seattle could decide to put aside its entire budget for a year to try to solve this issue. And it wouldn't even be, that $1 billion would not even be a drop in the bucket in what's necessary to change the overall fossil fuel economy that shipping and airlines operate off of. And so what's more important for us is to lead by example in a way that every airport, every seaport could model as a way to reduce emissions as part of this global system of shipping and air traffic. And one way we've done that is to say at the state level, we have gone and advocated for something called the low carbon fuel standard, because that's a necessary but not sufficient step for us to get to the sort of zero emissions operations that we want as a seaport and an airport. And right now we're going to the federal government to say we need the kind of supports for what's called a blender's credit, so that we can get airlines to start using sustainable aviation fuel instead of fossil fuel for the planes, which has lower GHG emissions and local air particulate emissions. So that, I think, is how we do it, by modeling the way for other airports to follow.
Thank you. From position 3, Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you. In addition to the points that my colleagues have already stated, some of the things that we can do as a port is develop alternative noise metrics that do not rely on the FAA's computer models that track the sensitivity of noise events, right? We need more accurate data and information about the effects of noise to mitigate it, increasing the arrival gliding scopes to a minimum of 3 degrees is important. And also to Port Commissioner Ryan Calkins' point, this is a federal issue as well. And so we as a port need to be strong regional partners and leaders in the conversation. And I'm endorsed by our US Congressman Adam Smith, King County, our Senator Karen Kaiser and Tina Orwell, who have all been advocates of this issue and who I look forward to being partners with. The health impacts are severe. If elected, I will become the only port commissioner living in South King County. And I'm telling you, this community is a community significantly impacted by these operations. We have higher hospitalization rates. We have higher rates of stroke, higher death rates than any other part of the county. And it's time that we have a seat at the table.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bowman.
Great, thank you. It's a great question. I want to answer the question that you asked. Let's just start with, of course, there are the communities that are directly around port operations, whether at the seaport or the airport, that are disproportionately impacted by those operations. Let me tell you a few of the things that I've done and that we're working on. Number one is reducing our carbon footprint around our marine terminals by electrification of those marine terminals, such as what we're doing at Terminal 5, which will come online in January of next year, and providing shore power there. Also moving towards zero emission drayage trucks, which are one of the most significant emitters of carbon pollution around the marine ports. At the airport, there's 3 things that we've worked on that I'm very proud of. Bringing sustainable aviation fuels to the airport, working with Alaska Airlines and our partners, bringing renewable natural gas to heat our central terminal, and electrifying our cargo handling equipment at the airport. Those are specific steps that we've already taken to reduce the impact of those communities.
All right, thank you very much. We'll proceed on now to question 4. And this is a 2-part question. First, do you support continuing the Northwest Seaport Alliance between the ports of Tacoma and Seattle? And 2, what mechanisms exist to monitor the effectiveness of this economic development initiative to make it more competitive with ports in other states? And that first question goes to Mr. Calkins.
I thought it was my turn. Boy, and we get 1 minute on this one too, huh? So I guess the short answer is I absolutely support the continued alliance. I think it has been an excellent marriage of our 2 ports and the international cargo, seaport cargo side of things. In terms of monitoring, I think the proof's in the pudding. Right now, we are struggling to manage all the demand that's coming in. That's obviously related to the surge in imports that are coming in, but we cannot get T5 open soon enough, which is going to be the 4th major terminal in that alliance, 2 in Tacoma and 2 in Seattle. We wish we had it open 6 months ago at this point, but the sooner we can get it open, the better. And what it means is that not only can we charge higher prices coming through our gateway because we're not competing against each other in a race to the bottom, but it also means that we can put in stricter labor standards, higher environmental standards. And it means that we're a better customer service option for those carriers, because it means that we've got a variety of terminals, whether it's for roll-on, roll-off cargo, container cargo, break bulk cargo, you name it. We've got facilities that can serve all of it. And so by being able to sell it in that way, I think it's been a great marriage.
All right, Mr. Zigler.
I wholeheartedly support the alliance. I was one of the few people that I knew advocating that the Port of Seattle and the Port of Tacoma not compete with each other. And I think we have 17 different ports in the state of Washington. I'd like to see an alliance between all of those ports in the state of Washington. We don't need to compete with each other. We have to compete with the biggest port in our region, which is in Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I'd like to add high-speed or rail or high-frequency rail to our ports in Tacoma and in Seattle to offload those TEUs that are coming in, especially in the Supermax ships that will berth at Terminal 5 near West Seattle. They can hold up to 33,000 units, and each of those units is basically an 18-wheeler on our roads. And so to be able to remove those from the ships as soon as possible, and then put them on roads or on trains outside of the immediacy of the shoreline, I think it's a necessary step that we need to invest in.
All right, from position 3, Ms. Bowman.
Thank you. This is one of my favorite questions because I led the formation of the Northwest Seaport Alliance. And so I would say, yes, I am definitely a fan. It was one of the first things that I did when I joined the Port Commission about 6.5 years ago, was led that effort to bring the two ports together. I think some of the metrics that we do use and will continue to use are, number one, looking at market share. Are we increasing our market share? I would point out that our competition is not necessarily with other states, but it is West Coast ports in North America. As Commissioner Calkins pointed out, it is the Port of Vancouver, British Columbia, but also the Port of Prince Rupert. Making sure that we have a diversified portfolio and measuring our TEUs or whatever we happen to do, whether it's, as Commissioner Calkins mentioned, roll on, roll off. There's different sorts of cargo that we bring on. The third and most important metric for me, however, is the number of jobs created and saved locally. That's really why we have ports. We need to make sure that we're supporting our local economy and our local residents, and that's the most important metric.
All right, thank you. From position 4, Mr. Steinbrook.
Yeah, thanks. Well, you can see I'm a big fan of our seaport with the backdrop here of our soon to be reopened, newly modernized Terminal 5, which will be the premier terminal. The ship there right now is the Maris Cornelia, and it's half the size of the ships that are the new global carriers, that it can take as much as 20,000 TEUs. We have to be well positioned. I congratulate my predecessors on the commission for their wisdom, as well as the Tacoma managing members for creating the Seaport Alliance in the first place. It was one of the most brilliant moves of the two ports in a century. And it positions us to take on and be more highly competitive with discretionary cargo that can go to other ports. As you see, there's a surge out there. We're working hard to address that, but we don't have nearly the problem that the Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach have right now. And we're well positioned with the reopening of Terminal 5, another very smart decision that I was fortunate to have part in. We are a high investment, low margin port like many, and we're doing everything possible to remain competitive.
Very good. Ms. Hasagawa.
Point of order, Mr. Co-Chair. Did you mean to skip Ms. Mohammed?
That was a mistake.
I did. Oh boy, did I bungle that. Ms. Mohammed, my apologies. Thank you for catching me on that. You get a box of candy. Ms. Mohammed, please.
Thank you, Ms. Hasagawa. I appreciate that. I am in complete support of that partnership with the Port of Tacoma. It was definitely the right thing to do. And this moment that we are in today, where we are seeing a rise in demand for shipping and the cost of shipping is going up and bottlenecks everywhere, it underscores that the importance of that partnership. And there are some short-term strategies to help address some of those issues that we are seeing. at our ports and the ports that are in our nation, ensuring that we're maximizing our efficientness, making sure that the importers are quickly picking up their cargo, and that it's not just sitting in warehouses, and ensuring that we're also making some long-term investments in infrastructure and equipments that handle these freight surges that we are seeing. I commend the Northwest Seaport Alliance purchasing 8 new cranes, and I look forward to the redevelopment of Terminal 5 coming online. And I'll pause there.
Okay, once again, my apologies. And back to position 4, Miss Hasagawa.
Thank you so very much, Sam and everyone. So I wholeheartedly support the Seaport Alliance. The idea is to make sure that we're contending regionally in a global economy. And to the point that's been made and reiterated, we need to compete with Vancouver and Prince Rupert to the north, as well as LA and Long Beach to the south. The port is a little bit behind schedule because all of those ports have already gone fully electric. We finally have that in our plans. As Commissioner Bowman mentioned, we're finally getting ready to go with Terminal 5. I would love to see T46 gone fully electric to be able to help, load and unload break bulk and cargo. One of the metrics that we have is take a look at the Port of Seattle being the 4th largest container port in the nation, the point of entry for goods and for people around the world. The shipping and fishing industries had their best years on record, but our supply chain isn't able to keep step. So as Port Commissioner, I'm going to be laser focused on taking a hard look at that $1 trillion package coming from the Biden administration, to take a look at our infrastructure and make sure that we can promote a flowing supply chain that can keep step with the demand.
Okay, that wraps up question 4. On to question 5. In its draft proposal to increase levels of toxic chemicals allowable in the Duwamish and East Waterway, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency calls for significantly lower pollution standards for the Duwamish Superfund cleanup. If you're elected, how will you respond to this draft proposal? In position 3, Ms. Mohammed, you go first.
This is a simple answer, ensuring that folks who have been doing this work, the Duwamish Cleanup Coalition, ensuring that we are being thoughtful in making sure that the EPA understands the importance of community input, that they do not propose or make changes without those inputs, and that we don't go back to the way things were. And it has been really devastating for the communities who have been working on these issues for decades to see this new proposal. And the port needs to take stronger leadership in ensuring that the EPA and our congressional delegation also understands the importance of not walking those commitments back. In addition to that, I will just point out that we are seeing these same sort of type of issues happening across the board with the North Sea-Tac Park issue, where there were proposals put out there to put a parking lot at one of our parks. And now that the parking lot is off the table, a warehouse is being considered for Sea-Tac Park. We cannot do these things. They impact communities. We have to protect our rivers and our parks as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Also in position 3, Ms. Bowman.
Great, thank you. Let me just start by saying we all care about the health of the Duwamish, both the people that live adjacent to it and the salmon who can't speak for themselves and the orca who depend on the salmon. It is critical that we help clean up the Duwamish, and I'm proud of the work that the port has done with our other partners in Seattle and King County on the cleanup. There is much more to do, and I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to what is the standard that we're trying to clean up for. And I don't want to give somebody the wrong impression. We're not going to get the Duwamish to the level where it is capable of being drinking water, but what it needs to be is safe habitat for people and for fish. Working in conjunction with the EPA on those standards, and most importantly, the community around it, is what I'm working on doing right now. It's a complicated issue. It has been decades and decades of pollution by many polluters, most of whom have been long gone from the area, and the port and the other public agencies are left holding the bag. Again, much more to do, but we all need the Duwamish to be healthy.
Thank you. Position 4, Ms. Hasagawa.
I grew up fishing on the docks and buying fish from the natives out of the Duwamish River. And now I help communities run campaigns on fun to catch, but toxic to eat that target specifically English language learners because of the negative health impacts that it has on what is a historically indigenous and historically brown and working class neighborhood. So there is a social justice to this environmental impact. And what the Port of Seattle and the EPA promised before was in 2014 was a complete cleanup. And community is very clear in their demand that they want to see that promise from 2014 honored. Community has also outlined their demand to make sure that there's full transparency into that process. They want to be consulted. I think many of us wouldn't have even known about this going on if it wasn't for the whistleblowing led by community members in the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition in alerting us all to it via the Seattle Times. And that's the stewardship that we need to look to. That's the community empowerment that we can lean on to help guide us, because community knows what it needs. And so my priority one is going to be honoring those requests.
All right, Mr. Steinbrook.
There we go. Okay, thanks. My history with the Duwamish River cleanup dates back at least 20 years when I served on the Seattle City Council and participated in talks with our partners, the city, the port, the county, and Bowman. So I have a long history here, and I can tell you I commend the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition for its decades of hard work on behalf of its communities and the people who have been disproportionately impacted. That said, we have not supported any reduction whatsoever in the pollution standards that have been set by the EPA nationwide. We are committed to the highest level of cleanup that is science-based, that doesn't call for removing 9 feet of clean fill to get to the dirty sediments that would stir up turbidity and make the river worse. So let's be science-based about this, but we are absolutely committed partners with the city and the county to do what is right and necessary to address this horrific Superfund site that has gone too long unclean and unhealthy.
Okay, from position number 1, Mr. Zigler.
I am in agreement with everything. We have to clean it up and keep it clean. Like I said before, my first job out of undergrad was as an environmental scientist. And so I was able to go around the country and survey commercial property as part of financial holdings for environmental contaminants, whether it's been building materials or neighboring Superfund sites. That was my first introduction to Superfund sites in 1989. I know I look a lot younger than that, but it's been way too long that we're still talking about these things. And so we need to clean it up and keep it clean. And I would partner with all of the other agencies in our region and around the world who are devoted to healthy waterways and healthy oceans. The Seattle Aquarium is embarking on an ambitious mission to transform themselves from just an aquarium to a conservation agency whose mission is ocean health. And the Port of Seattle can partner with the aquarium and other agencies in our region to make sure all our waterways, especially Duwamish, our only river, are cleaned. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Calkins.
I actually think this instance is an example of the excellent work that Port of Seattle staff has done in developing community engagement with the people of the Duwamish River. So that when this first came to be known, when the proposed rule change came to be known, the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition contacted Commissioner Fellman and myself and requested a meeting. We met with him quickly, and we were truly blessed to have somebody like Commissioner Fellman with an extraordinary expertise in this very subject matter, who then almost single-handedly worked with the city and the county to craft a response that the three agencies could send directly to the EPA, signed by the executives of all three agencies, Mayor Durkin, Commissioner Fellman, and the county executive, stating very clearly on behalf of all of us as a group, sorry, my 5-year-old daughter is behind me, our position on this. And so I think because of that relationship that the port has developed with those communities, there was a communication channel that was immediately accessible in addressing this very issue. So I think it's ended up being a win for the community.
Thank you. And on to question number 6. Climate change predictions include rising sea levels. Does the port have plans in place to address this issue when repairs and new construction are done on the waterfront? We'll start with position 4, Mr. Steinbrook.
Great. I love this question because since I joined the commission in my professional life, I've been working on resiliency of critical infrastructure. And I discovered that the port had no resiliency plan to address extreme hazards of climate change and other hazards such as seismic and beyond, human created. So I am very pleased to report that largely due to my efforts, the executive director and the entire port has taken on a massive study of high-risk hazards to protect our critical infrastructure well into the future. There are some 30 different participants port-wide, from the airport to the seaport, our marine, all of our marine division, fishermen's terminal, they're all participating to look at, to examine our vulnerabilities and weaknesses and come up with a hazard mitigation plan to reduce some of the hazards such as tidal surge, excessive inundation from rain. And we're very fortunate we haven't seen that as the kind of things that have happened on the East Coast recently.
Thank you. Ms. Hasagawa.
Yes, and I believe that some of the best measures that we can take are preventative. And when it comes down to it, the port is still one of the top polluters of carbon emissions in the entire state. It has a huge role to play in being able to meaningfully reduce the amount of pollution that we put out that are actually significantly contributing to the climate change that we're experiencing right now. I think that the port's agenda to be able to, go carbon neutral, be able to reduce its carbon footprint in the next 30 years is a little uninspirational. We need bolder action now. I'm disappointed that the low carbon fuel standard completely exempts ports, because I think we had a huge opportunity to be able to make sure that some of the industrial actors were making strides towards the right thing, particularly given, shipping and fishing's best years on record. So, we have some huge carbon fuel guzzlers that are operating. And so I would love to put measures into place in policy that incentivize folks to make a meaningful transition away from fossil fuels into more renewable, sustainable energy sources, and then rewarding good behavior and progress where we see it happen.
All right. From position 1, Mr. Calkins.
Yeah, thank you. So I think what's important to understand is the impacts of climate change writ large are probably more of a threat to the operations of the Port of Seattle than rising sea levels. So we need to have a comprehensive response to climate change. And in addition, we also need to focus on climate action. What are we doing to mitigate against harms from climate change? But also, what are we doing to stop future contributions of greenhouse gas emissions? And so that's going to take efforts like sequestration. We have piloted a program in Elliott Bay that is actually pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, we've created eelgrass and kelp beds in Elliott Bay that suck up carbon from the atmosphere, and then when they decompose, they fall to the seabed. Those kinds of programs where we're piloting ways to actually reduce the carbon in the atmosphere are going to be necessary in the all-in approach that we all need to take to defeat climate change.
All right. Also from position 1, Mr. Zigler.
Thank you. And so again, my opening statement, I think that the best way to reduce the rising sea levels is to stop polluting. Now we need to keep as much of the fuel in the ground as we can. And so we have to move to environmentally sustainable fuel sources and energy sources. So I would propose using a portion of port operations and profit to invest in a clean energy coalition for our region, enhance the energy partnerships that are already there, working with University of Washington, the industries in our backyard. We have some of the smartest people on the planet living here. You in Horizon House, you're home to some of the most talented people who've ever walked the dirt in Washington State. We have the brains. We put a person on the moon in 10 years in the 1960s. Surely we can address climate change and act on it now by reducing the pollution of the port and port operations and port operators. And we need to incentivize that. Thank you.
From position 3, Ms. Bowman.
Excellent, thank you. I just want to harken back to the question that was asked, which was about investing in the infrastructure related to climate change. And I want to give a big shout out to Commissioner Steinbrook. As he said, we can back him up. He has been the lead on this issue of resiliency for the Port of Seattle. He deserves an enormous amount of credit for his work in the 3.5 years he served on the commission focusing on resiliency. I do want to say that it is more, though, than just about climate change. It's also about resiliency of the port's infrastructure in a natural disaster. You might not know, but during 9/11, when they were evacuating folks from downtown Manhattan, 500,000 people went by marine transport across the bay. Just last week, I went on, and Commissioner Steinbrook and I went on what we hope will be a reopening of the mosquito fleet from Des Moines up to Elliott Bay. We need to be looking at those opportunities for resiliency of our infrastructure at the port. And it's something, again, that Commissioner Steinbrook is led on. I'm happy to support. Thank you.
Okay, candidates, thank you very much for your responses to those questions. We will now turn to.
Oh, wait, we didn't all get to answer.
Who am I missing now? Ms. Mohammed, I apologize again. You're not in my.
I don't think position 4 got to answer the question either.
I will come back then.
Okay.
I apologize. Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. How do we reduce our rising sea levels? We must reduce our footprint, protect our wetlands, ensure that we are protecting our plants and trees and parks. Those are all ways that we can ensure that we are, reducing our rising sea levels, as well as moving towards electrification, electrifying our ports, but not only putting in more shore power, but ensuring that we have agreements to ensure that these vessels that are coming in, the cruise ships are actually plugging into those shore power. Having agreements ensures that that they are doing what is needed. And so we need stronger regulations in place and policies in place to ensure that not only when we're moving towards electrification, that we are ensuring that they're being used, and infrastructure, that is a top priority for me, making sure that when we're looking at the federal infrastructure bill that includes shore power, that we are pushing for more dollars that support electrification. There are so many companies that are seeking carbon credits, and we have to ensure that we're moving in that direction to keep us competitive and more green. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Actually, Mr. Steinbrook, we started with you on this question.
You're right, I forgot.
And that's right.
Late.
It's getting late and close to bedtime. So we will move on to closing statements, and everybody gets 2 minutes.
Okay.
We're going to start now with position number 3, and we'll start with the challengers for position 3, Hamdi Mohammed.
Thank you, Sam. That was funny comments you made there. Thank you all for this opportunity to share with you tonight. It's 8:45. It's really late. Thank you for staying on and hearing all of us. Again, my top priorities as Port Commissioner will be economic development, workforce development, and making investments in infrastructure and our environment. Today, we have a maritime industry, an aviation industry that's aging, and we have young people who can't even identify or define what maritime is. And this pandemic has hit all of our communities really hard. And so what I want to ensure is that the abundance of resources that are available at our ports is reaching all of our communities. That's our community members on the east side and South King County. I have the experience and the support from the community to be a very successful port commissioner. Again, I'm endorsed by Congressman Adam Smith, King County Executive Dow Constantine, our Attorney General Bob Ferguson, our Commissioner of Public Lands. These are all regional leaders who believe in my leadership and a vision for a stronger port. I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
And in position 3, the incumbent, Stephanie Bowman.
Thank you. Well, I just want to thank Horizon House again for hosting us tonight. I only regret that we can't do it in person. It is always my favorite forum because you have such educated residents who care and have asked us amazing questions tonight. You know, you all know that the port is the region's economic engine, but it's not just the region's economic engine. Again, it's the state's backbone for our economy. It's an important job to be the port commissioner. At the end of the day, what's most important is that we're managing these assets of statewide significance on behalf of all of the residents of King County. People depend, thousands and thousands of jobs depend on the decisions that port commissioners make. We have an existential crisis in front of us with climate change, and we need to be balancing the operations of the Port of Seattle with addressing climate change and making sure that we're reducing our carbon footprint at every opportunity. I'm really proud of the work that I've done. I'm not going to rattle off a list of endorsements. The only thing that really matters at the end of the day is that you all feel supported and will support the Port of Seattle. I hope that I can earn your vote, but most importantly, I want you to know that the port is here. We're listening to what you want us to do, and thank you again for caring so much about this. Most people don't pay much attention to the port, but it's really invigorating to know that the residents of Horizon House have such great questions for all of us, and you always have me to be able to call at any time, and again, thank you for the evening.
All right, from position 1, the challenger, Norman Zigler.
Thank you, Horizon House hosts and Mr. Sperry. I appreciate the time. Again, my name is Norman Zigler. I am running for Port of Seattle position number 1. And my main focus is to lead boldly. We have to get to carbon neutrality by 2030. 2050 or 10 years from that, 2040 is unacceptable. We've got to do it. We've got to mitigate port pollution and use some of the operating profits, operating expense or revenue to do that. And we also have to protect the neighboring communities of the port, especially the South Sound communities to the airport, mitigate the impact of port operations. I love flying. I have aviation fuel in my blood. I love the magic of seeing those planes in the air and being on those planes. But we can't do that anymore. We can't fly anywhere in the world anytime we want to anymore until we get a handle on our climate situation. And we participate in air travel, but we have to do it in a smart way. And I want to be the port commission with aviation experience to work with the airlines to devise a solution that can be best in world here in Seattle of how we transform how we travel by air. Thank you for your time. Again, say hello to Dr. Henry Kuhart for me. I hope his mouth is better from his tooth pain last week. And I look forward to working with you as a port commissioner.
All right, the incumbent in position 1, Ryan Calkins.
Well, first off, let me say thank you to all of you for tuning in tonight and taking an opportunity to learn more about the Port of Seattle. Thank you to the moderators for an excellent job. Thank you to Neil for the best description of the port I've ever heard. I think I want a transcript of that I can use. As you think about who you're going to vote for in this election, I want you to think about how you define economic success. For me, economic success is how are we, as the Port of Seattle, using that economic engine to ensure shared prosperity across our region in King County and beyond? How are we making sure that those who historically have not had access to the economic benefits of our port finally get access to that. And so this weekend, when I was reading the article that Seattle Times wrote about Maritime High School, there was a paragraph that really stood out to me. It described a young woman who wants to be a marine biologist. She's a person of color coming from one of our poorest communities here in King County. And it described how she's getting onto the boat that Maritime High School is using as part of their project-based learning. She's never been on a boat like that before. And so she is literally grasping the mast to hold steady. She is nervous and scared. But I think about the 4-year experience she's going to have at Maritime High School. She's going to come out of there. She's going to be a master sailor. She's going to be a great marine biologist. And none of that would have been possible had it not been for Maritime High School, something that I instigated as a commissioner after hearing about that gap between what was available to these students in reaching those lower rungs of the maritime career ladder, that gap that existed between where the entry point was and what those kids had access to. And I hope that you'll vote for another 4 years for me to get to continue those initiatives and other initiatives as we build a green economy for our region. So thank you again. I hope you'll vote for me come November.
All right. From position 4, Toshiko Hasagawa.
You know, my core values lead me to believe that economic empowerment is going to lead to social justice, and that healthy ecosystems are going to lead to healthy communities, and that the port has a huge role to play in answering to these compounding economic and environmental and public health crises of our time. And from my point of view, it's uniquely positioned to be a leader in bringing together the stakeholders in industry and business and labor and community to build back our economy to be more inclusive, to be more sustainable, to be more lucrative than it was before. And this election really boils down as to whether people want more of the same or whether they want to do something different and dynamic. And I have the values and the experience to be able to get the job done and to get it done starting on day one. That's why I am endorsed from folks across different stakeholder groups and leaders like Governor Jay Inslee and Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, Congressman Smith, 4 King County Council members, and elected leaders from, over 50 people from local government who know me. They know my work, and they know that I'm ready to go starting on day one. What the port does next is going to have huge reverberating consequences for our region and our economy for generations. And as a new mom, I wonder if my daughter is going to get to enjoy the opportunities and the riches of the Pacific Northwest the way our elders did before us. So I'm so supremely proud to facilitate a public dialogue around the potential of the port and where we could all go together and really ensure that the rising tide of our recovering economy is going to lift all ships. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I look forward to staying in touch.
All right. And the incumbent candidate in position 4, Peter Steinbrook.
Well, thanks very much, Sam. You've been a great moderator. And I have to agree with my colleagues here on the panel that Neil McReynolds really called it out, and when he defined the port's role and how important it is. When it comes to jobs in the economy, whoops, 15 seconds. That was fast. Now, the city and the county don't touch what we do in terms of creating equitable jobs and supporting and building our regional and statewide economy. There's no comparison. We do it with less than 5% of tax support. That's pretty amazing. Now, I want to talk about values a little bit. I learned early in life indelible civic lessons and community values at the side of my father, working to advance the goal 8 years in the making to save the Pike Place market, mostly a collection of small businesses, mom and pop, ethnic businesses, immigrant farmers, you name it. And that battle was legendary, and it happened 50 years ago. And I'm very proud of my family's legacy and contributions to our city, the region, and the state. As Port Commissioner, I've worked hard to move our port forward with steady, experienced leadership, unswerving commitment to human values and transparency that I learned decades ago. As Port Commissioner, I've worked to create thousands of family wage quality construction jobs and dock jobs, provided critical oversight of billions in public works projects, a $10 million South King County Community Impact Fund to address the disparities in South King County, a comprehensive carbon reduction plan for Sea-Tac Airport, a carbon-less, fully electrified seaport by 2030. Yes, we are going to get there. It takes time and it takes a lot of money. An extensive assessment of port policing practices and policing reform that resulted in 52 recommendations on civil rights, social justice, and accountability and at the police department. So we can build the port of the future together to be the region's driver for equitable middle-income jobs, the environmental leader among ports globally, and ending systemic racism while demonstrating sound financial management, greater taxpayer accountability, transparency, and open government. Thank you so much.
Very good. And candidates, thank you for giving us your time tonight. We know campaigning is hard work, but also you are a good example to all of us of democracy in action. And at a time when we certainly need good people, we thank you for putting yourselves forward for this important local institution. I will now return the microphone to our Elections and Forums Committee co-chairman, Neil McReynolds, for a closing statement and a preview of next week's program.
Good job, Sam. Thank you for moderating this evening's program with the candidates for the Seattle Port Commission. Now, you kept things moving, which is always good and challenging when you're in that role, but it's important. We want to give everybody a chance to talk, and I know our audience is really interested in hearing from all of you. So we got to cover a lot of subjects. You found the challenge of having 6 candidates to deal with, but you did well, so thank you. And thanks to the candidates for participating in our forum and recognizing the busy schedule you have as candidates with an election a little over a month away. So just sitting back thinking about all things we've covered tonight, really have provided us a lot of good information and ideas for things that are important for us to consider as we cast our votes in the election in the month ahead. So anyway, thank you for doing that, and I appreciate the time and so forth. So also, I'd like to thank all those who've helped make this forum possible, especially Risa Ransom, Jenny Stimson, and the people who supported the event on the technical side, and Doris Ray and her subcommittee that developed the excellent questions for the candidates this evening, as well as the other forums during the election season. This concludes the evening's program. Don't forget next week's election forum featuring candidates for mayor of Seattle and the Seattle School Board. The forum will be on Tuesday evening, October 5th, not our usual Monday evening. And so that's the thing to remember, Tuesday, not Monday next week. So hope to see you all then. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you all.